Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Pacers Daily. I'm your host, Hery Acosta. We have a few fun things to talk about today. All starts with the Pacers re-signing Isaiah Jackson to a 3-year, $21 million deal. Great signing. Obviously, we wanted to either bring him back or bring back Thomas Bryant. We'll get to Thomas Bryant later. But locking in Isaiah Jackson for the next 3 years is going to be very important. He is going to most likely be our starting center this year. He's going to be coming off an Achilles injury, so might take some time for him to get fully readjusted to getting back on the court. But I know he's back to shoot-arounds and everything, looking pretty good on that leg. So this is a very good signing, very low price for a high-value player of his caliber. Someone who looked like he was going to have a breakout season off the bench. But obviously that injury came. Wiseman was already out. So obviously Thomas Bryant and Bradley both had to get involved instead of what we wanted from Jackson. But now that the 2025 season starts in a few months, Jackson should be pretty much 100% by the time the season comes around, because he was injured very early in last season. But I kept finding it kind of interesting how the Pacers had 3 torn Achilles in the same season. That is a very, very rare thing. But now we're going to talk about someone who a lot of people were hoping would come back. But after the Isaiah Jackson signing, after the J. Huff trade, after the Tony Bradley re-sign, and the James Wiseman signing, there's just no space for Thomas Bryant back on the roster. Now, I personally liked what Thomas Bryant brought to the Pacers. I think he was perfect as a backup center. He played very well whenever he had to start during Miles' few injury games. I thought he had a good showing in the playoffs. Wasn't a fan of him sitting out as much as he did. I thought he should have gotten more minutes than Tony Bradley, but Tony Bradley did have, his time. He played decent, but Thomas Bryant brings energy. He's a big body. He's good in the paint. He's a good 3-point shooter. He's someone who can also space the floor, but he's most likely going to end up somewhere else. Now he's going to be a player to look out for, just because the free agent pool now is not exactly the most star-studded. Obviously, players like Josh Giddey has still not re-signed with the Bulls. Russell Westbrook is currently still a free agent. So there's some players to keep looking at, but Thomas Bryant will join that list of players most likely on the move now. But I want to wish him luck. I thought he brought great energy. He was a very good locker room guy. A guy who was always stepping up for his teammates. So he was definitely someone that you want on your roster. Had good stints with Miami, won a championship in Denver. Obviously, his career started between the Lakers and the Wizards. So, someone to definitely look out for. Now, I hope this is the last time I have to bring up Miles Turner in one of these videos, at least until we play the Bucks, whenever that is. But just his comments during his press conference were just there. A lot of them were not necessary, in my opinion, because it just felt like he was just trying to take shots at Indy. And this city welcomed him with open arms in the 2015 draft. Watched him progress, watched him become the player he is. Yes, he has been in trade rumors pretty much over the last 3 or 4 seasons, but that wasn't fully started by Pacers media. Most trade rumors in the NBA start with ESPN. They start with Lakers, Knicks, all the big market medias will always be like, oh, we would like this player. We want this player. But yeah, Miles Turner was kind of on the trade block for a while. Nothing ever came of it. We ended up trading Sabonis before we traded Turner. Traded players like Oladipo before we traded Turner, Paul George, Karis LeVert. All these players before anything could even come of a Miles Turner trade. Traded Buddy Hield, so just Chris Duarte, all these players that had their roles in Indy, whether they were big, small. But Turner's been a staple for the Pacers for years. Obviously, every fan has a different opinion. I think he's good at certain things, while other things still could use some improvement. But I just some of the comments he was making, like wanting to stay competitive. The Pacers still have a competitive roster. We have a very young, talented team that just is coming off a finals appearance. Yes, no Halliburton. Yes, now you're gone. But still very similar roster to what it was last season. Now you're going to have players wanting even more now that they get to step up. See Mathurin, what he's going to do. See Demhard, what he's going to do. And the other one was, which I kind of reiterated it earlier, but he said they wanted me gone for years, but now that I'm gone, now that I actually am gone, it's a problem. Not necessarily, but people are mainly upset that Turner signed with a rival like the Bucks for only like $3 to $4 million more than what he would have gotten in Indy. And if it's true about the fact that they didn't even give Indy a chance to re-sign, then that's not necessarily on the Pacers. But if it's true that the Pacers didn't want to offer that, that's its own thing. But I mean, Bucks gave him the money that he wanted. Pacers, maybe they could have matched, maybe they didn't, but they ended up not matching, which happens in the NBA. But it's gonna be fun to watch the rivalry now that he's in Milwaukee and has already thrown shots at Indy, which wonderful, bring it on. And then just some quick thoughts about the upcoming season. I personally think that there's going to be a lot of breakout candidates that I've talked about over the last few videos. The main one I do want to talk about is Mathurin, just because I genuinely think he has all-star potential. I mean, he was the 6th pick in a loaded 2022 draft. That 2022 draft has already seen three top 12 players win a ring already. Those being Chet Holmgren, Jalen Williams, and Ousmane Dieng. But Mathurin was one of the best rookies in that class. He had a little bit of a sophomore slump in his second season, but he also had that shoulder injury, so he missed out on his first playoffs. But he's been balling. 3rd leading scorer. When healthy, absolute dog. Now, missed some clutch free throws in the finals. Yada, yada, yada. Had up and down performances. One day it's a 27-point game. The next game he's 1 for 10. So his consistency is going to have to improve. Now, obviously, he is 23 years old. He's still very young. He could still a lot of time to develop. Now, because of the injury and everything, looks like he's going to be a starter. And I personally believe he has that all-star potential. The other player that I think could also have all-star potential is Andrew Nembhard. Now, if he's not an all-star, he definitely has all-defensive team potential. He probably would have been all-defensive team this year if it wasn't for his injury, because he did miss a lot of games at the beginning of the season, and he was like sporadically hurt throughout the year. Same with Nesmith. Nesmith was a potential all-defensive candidate, but Nembhard locks your favorite player up whenever they play against each other. Brunson struggled against Nembhard. Shea had his worst performances when he was guarded by Nembhard. So just knowing that a player like Nembhard could go against their best player, if their best player is obviously a point or a shooting guard, go against them and just lock him on Alcatraz, then that's exactly what we need out of that. So those are 2 players I really want to see get better. And I also want to see how players like Cam Jones and Johnny Furphy develop. Obviously, Furphy's entering his 2nd season while Jones is a rookie. And I just really want to see how they can fit into the rotation with injuries and certain players leaving. And I think a player like Furphy has good potential. He is a good 3-and-D player. I think he can really develop into a spot-up shooter and just someone who can kind of stretch the floor out bring in, if there's a double team coming up on Nemhard or somebody, kick it right out. There he is. And then another player to look at, TJ McConnell. I think he's going to have a lot more to do with this offense. He might get more minutes. Might even try to start him up in games if Matherin starts to struggle. So there's just a lot of really cool things to look at for next season. Trying to be optimistic, just because everything that's going on. But as always, I'm your host, Hery Acosta. This is Pacers Daily. Boom, baby, and go Sirs.